Hi everyone and welcome to this Back on Track webinar. My name is Isabel Rofe and I'm an Education Community Manager at ACCA. If you've recently experienced an exam setback and you need help getting back on track, then don't worry, you're not alone. This session is designed to help you overcome that disappointment and plan for success in your next attempt. And we've got lots to cover today, so we'll go straight into the agenda. So as I said, the purpose of this webinar is to provide practical guidance, and that's going to help you reflect on your recent exam attempt and use the experience to help you plan next steps with confidence. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by James Patrick, our Head of Education and Student Support. He'll be joining us later in the session to talk through a new exam tool, My Exam Performance. We'll also look later on at the ACCA resources that will help you along the way, and at the end of the session, we'll have some time to answer some of your questions. But before we get stuck into that content, I'm going to quickly run through some housekeeping points. So you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there are several icons that you can click on. There's a help icon, and that looks a little like gears. That provides the resources you need to resolve any technical issues you may experience. Slides and media player, and you'll need to have both of those open during the webinar, so make sure to select those now. You can rearrange your screen to suit your preference, and if at any point your sound isn't playing or the slides aren't progressing, just try refreshing your browser. You'll see a Q&A button. You can use that to submit questions, and we have a dedicated team working behind the scenes committed to answering as many of your questions as they can. But do note that the volume of questions we receive in live webinars means that we can't always respond to everyone directly. But we're going to cover some key themes, and there is time for a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, so hopefully we'll cover your questions even if we can't answer directly. We do have an attendee chat icon as well, and that's going to help you communicate with other attendees who are also listening in. Any responses you add there will be visible to everyone watching. There is also a resource icon, which includes links to lots of useful resources, some of which we'll cover in this session. So take a look at that. And finally, registering for this webinar means that you'll be sent an email tomorrow allowing you to access the recorded version. So don't worry if you miss anything, or if you have some technical issues, you'll be able to access the recording and rewatch whenever you are able to. So I wanted to get started on this session with a couple of polls, and they'll help us get to know you a little bit better and find out where you are on your ACCA journey. So the first poll will come up on your screen now, and we're asking, what was the last exam, or perhaps even exams, that you sat? So take a minute, and we'll see what exams you've all recently attempted shortly. You can see some of the answers coming in. That's great. I'll just give you a minute. Thanks everyone who's already submitted. Quite a few of you now, so I'll give you just a few more seconds and then we'll see the results. Right, let's see. Okay, so it's quite an even spread. There's a slight majority of people who have that performance management, but a good coverage, lots of the other applied skills exams there as well. So let's move on to the next poll, which asks, what are your plans for the next session? So have you booked your next exam in December? Are you still deciding what exams to take? Are you perhaps not even planning to take any exams in December, looking forward to March? Or perhaps you're not sure. So again, I'll just give you a minute to answer that. can see a few people answering in the Q&A box, just to make sure that you're using the poll function that should be up on your screen, but I can see quite a few of yours. I can see also in the attendee chat that some of you have already booked for December. That's great. Okay, so we've got a fair few of your answers now. Let's have a look. Okay, so over half of you have booked your next exam in December, and that's great. And we'll hopefully provide a lot of useful support in this session that's going to help you get ready for that. And for those of you who are still deciding, unsure, then hopefully we'll be able to give you some support that's going to let you book with confidence. You can start preparing for your next attempt. Right, so let's get stuck in. Depending on the outcome, results day will have stirred lots of different emotions, and reactions are going to vary, but self-reflection is a really important step on any learning journey. So whatever your result was, taking time to step back and reflect is going to be really, really beneficial to your future studies. So what we're going to do now is consider some useful questions to ask yourself and cover the areas of reflection that are going to help you push forward and increase your chances of success on your next attempt. Let's start with the positives. Now, what have you achieved so far? Bearing in mind that this is supposed to be a challenge, and that means the journey to ACCA qualification is likely going to involve a few tricky moments, such as this. But at this point, it would be really helpful to reflect on what you've achieved and remind yourself of your goals, as this is going to hopefully help you regain the motivation, visualize your next steps more clearly. Even if you weren't successful, and sticking with that positive thinking, there will be positives that you take from your last experience. For example, perhaps some of you were a marginal fail, and that means you absolutely have what it takes. You can reset and pass that exam next time. But identifying good habits is going to be key to your future success. So let's now turn to the areas for improvement. So for reflection to be as effective as possible, you'll need to review your recent experience as a whole. That includes planning, learning, and revision, as well as the exam experience itself. You really have to be honest and objective when you're doing this. It's really tempting to avoid critical self-reflection, as it can be uncomfortable, but it will be better for you in the long term. So at this point, some things to consider are what challenges or problems did you face during your each phase of study? Were these problems out of your control? So maybe there were distractions at work or home that impacted study time. If this was the case, have a think about how you're going to reduce the impact of, normal life events in the future. Or perhaps it was something that you can actually work on. So something like time management or gaps in knowledge. Remember, at this point, think about this in a solutions-focused way. Don't dwell on failure. Focus on the positives. Focus on finding solutions to any problems that you've identified. And that brings us to the final stage of reflection, and that's deciding what you're going to change next time. You really can't approach the next exam in the same way and expect different results. So it's very important to develop a clear plan of action. This is going to look different depending on your circumstances. So for those of you who may have achieved a low score, maybe you encountered unfamiliar topics in the last exam, or the problem might be due to gaps in your technical knowledge. Whereas students who had borderline fails, perhaps it's something, we know it won't be, it may be something to do with your exam techniques, such as time management, but we'll come on to all of this later, because now, as I mentioned, we're going to look at ACCA's new tool, My Exam Performance, which will be really, really helpful at this stage in helping you identify the areas that you. So at this stage, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, James Patrick. Hi, James.
Hi Isabel, hi everyone. Fantastic to be joining the session. So yeah, I'm just going to take a little bit of time to introduce and give you an overview of my exam performance and just start the conversation really about how my exam performance can help you prepare not just for your resit but throughout the whole of the applied skills level and even beyond. So do keep the questions coming through. I'm just going to start the video now for you guys to have a look at.
Introducing My Exam Performance, your personalised exam feedback report, helping you understand your strengths and weaknesses in the exam, including guidance on your time management, how you have performed across the syllabus, your objective test skills and guidance on the constructed response questions. It provides valuable tips and insights into how you can improve your exam performance.
Okay, just a little bit of a teaser there, and I want to explore some of the themes that the introductory video covered, just in a little bit more detail. Just starting off, I suppose, with a bit of background. Student satisfaction surveys, any focus groups that we do with students, any engagement we have with students where we ask them, what do we need to do as an organisation to provide better support, would always show us that some sort of feedback on students' exams is one of the key areas that we need to do better at providing support on. So it's something that we've had under consideration for a long time. We've been working for a long while to get to this stage. We're conscious that it is a real key area that the students want. Where are we with it now? Well, hopefully you are aware that it is now available for the core applied skills exam, so not the tax variants just yet, but it launched last week for the September 22 session. So if you sat an exam in the September 22 session for the core applied skills exams, you'll have access to the exams feedback. Right now, it's probably more relevant for you in terms of missing out previously and wanting to get back on track, whether that's December, March, or at some point in the future. I'm really keen to emphasise, though, that this isn't just a resit tool. So when we look at some examples of the feedback, and hopefully lots of you have had a chance to do that already if you did sit in September, I'm keen to emphasise that this can be used in the future, even if you do pass an exam. So if you're thinking about moving on to strategic professional level, having passed an applied skills exam, you can still identify any areas that you might want to tighten up a little bit on before you move on to the next level. At the moment, though, as I mentioned, probably a focus on if a student's missed out, what can we do in terms of using that feedback to identify specific weaker areas, as well as focus on areas on how to improve to the next step. Starting off, how do I access my exam performance? I know a number of you will have accessed it already, and a reoccurring theme for my exam performance is our desire to get feedback from students on how they're using it, what they'd like to see for future iterations of the feedback as well. But if you haven't had a chance to access it yet and you did sit in September, it's hopefully fairly intuitive to get hold of your feedback. So if you were to log on to the student portal, My ACCA, you can go to the detailed exam history, and quite small on the screen, but for the latest set of results, you can see a yellow button which just says View Exam Feedback, and that will take you to the homepage or the dashboard. I've got a few screen grabs of the feedback just to give you a flavour of the sort of feedback that you can expect. In this particular example, we've got a performance management exam, and this particular student scored 59%, so a pretty reasonable pass for performance management. And hopefully by showing you a pass version or a pass example of the feedback, it will give you comfort that actually it's not just for when you fail an exam. This is something that hopefully in the future you'll be using when you pass as well. So what feedback can you expect? Well, on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got our menu, and you can scroll down on this homepage as well to access these areas. But on the left-hand side, we've got a shortcut menu, if you will. You can get feedback on your time management per section. We'll explore that in a little bit more detail in a sec. You can get feedback, and probably one of my favourite areas actually is feedback on how you've performed across the different syllabus areas in your exams. So all of the questions are tagged for the syllabus areas that they cover, and what we do is take the data on how you've performed on those questions and give you an indication of how well you've performed across the syllabus areas. And you can already imagine using that information to help you focus on your resit or revision approach for your next attempt. Objective test skills, hopefully relevant. We'll look at a snapshot of them in just a moment. But again, one of my other favourite areas is the constructive response question, which gives you a little bit of guidance on what your question related to and what you should be doing moving forward, as well as giving some feedback from the examining teams for students who tended to fall within the band that you did. Let's jump on and have a look at time management. As I say, one of my favourite aspects of the feedback, I must admit. So I've just got some screen grabs up on screen just for illustration purposes. You can imagine intuitively clicking through the My Exams Performance section to be accessing this sort of content. So things to note here for section A. So it's done on a section by section basis, as you can see. For section A, in this example here, we spent 33 minutes and 35 seconds, fine. And also note that the result for section A is shown on the right-hand side there as well, so 49%. And what we're saying here is, in terms of the time spent, it was about the expected amount of time that we'd expect students to spend on this section of the exam. So a bit of comfort for this particular student that the time management was okay. Next steps says fine, time management is okay. Having said that, if your overall performance at section A was weak, maybe we've got some underlying technical knowledge issues. Maybe your exam technique needs a bit of improvement as well. And for this particular example, fine, their time management was okay, but they've got a bit of a marginal fail in section A. So time management was fine. Maybe other aspects of their exam technique needs improvement. As I say, maybe the technical knowledge needs a bit of a revision as well. So then what we say is, look, if you're going to move on to sit other applied skills exams, why don't you have a look at the syllabus area of the feedback to identify any weaker technical areas, and also have a look at the OT skills section of the report as well to identify whether there's any potential problematic types of OT questions that you might be struggling on. And as you can imagine, I should say, the next steps feedback will vary depending on the mark that you've got and the time that you spent on the question. So if you'd spent too long on the question, we would be flagging to you that you spent longer than perhaps you should have done, longer than we'd expect a well-prepared student to spend. We'd then signpost some exam technique support that would help you manage your time a little bit better for your next attempt. If you were really quick and you spent less time than we'd expect, we'd say, well, look, if you spent less time and still scored okay, then that's fine, that's fine. But if you spent less time and not scored as well as you should have done, if you've not passed this particular section, then think about your overall approach, because a mark in section A is just as valuable as a mark in section B or section C. So this particular example, time management was okay. We're slightly below the standard. So in this illustration, we'd expect the students to move on to have a little look in due course at their syllabus area performance and maybe the OT skills feedback as well. bearing in mind we are talking about section A, of course. Same sort of approach for section B. So for this one, the student or pretend student spent less time than expected on the exam. And again, in this example, they've spent less time than expected, but they've scored strongly. They've scored 63, as you can see on the top right-hand side of the screen. So here we're saying, look, let's not dwell on this. You've done well in terms of your time management and you've scored well. So let's focus on other potential weaker areas in the rest of the exam. If, as I mentioned, they'd spent less time than expected but not scored well, then we're back to the recommendation that they need to spend appropriate amounts of time on here. And that's where we start to think about our 1.8 minutes per mark as a starting point for splitting your time across the relevant sections of the exam. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, same sort of thing for section C. So in this example, 53 minutes, slightly under the time we'd expect. And as a disclaimer, we did actually ask a tutor to sit a real exam to give us some real feedback. And we asked the tutor to try and achieve a marginal result, which they've just about done. But they were obviously went through it a little bit too quickly. So again, spent less time than expected, but done pretty well on section C with a 63% mark. And again, the next steps would be reflective of the time that you actually spent, and we'd ask you to correlate that with the result that you've got for some specific recommendations. Okay, let's move on to the syllabus. As I mentioned, one of my other favourite areas. So for each of the overall syllabus areas, you will get feedback on how you did in that particular section, and you'll also get some guidance on how to improve in that particular area. So for the example that we're showing here, syllabus area B, 40%, so just about a marginal fail. And we're saying that it's below the required standard to achieve a pass. You're not quite there in terms of the knowledge and skills required for this particular syllabus area, so a bit more effort required here. And then we've got our next steps, which is our recommendation for how to I suppose, address the information that we've just mentioned. So we're saying, look, you're weak in syllabus area B. If you pass the exam overall, well, fantastic, well done. But just bear in mind that you didn't meet the required standard for this particular syllabus area. So if we're thinking about that transition as an example from PM to APM, you're going to want to perhaps go back and improve your knowledge in syllabus area B before you progress to APM. And we highlight some fantastic resources to help you do that. So we've got the Get Ready for APM, PM Knowledge Recap, and you can specifically look at syllabus area B to help you improve your knowledge in this area, so that when you start your APM studies, you're starting from a real position of strength. And then lower down, if you failed the exam, well, we're highlighting to you that a lack of knowledge in syllabus area B would have been a contributing factor to that. And I think this is where the syllabus feedback comes into its own. So if I think back to my own days as a student, which is too long ago now to mention, but if I missed out on an exam, which happens to most of us, I wouldn't quite know where, and you're back to that position of thinking, oh man, I've got to go back to my study manual and try and work through it all. I've got to go back through all of my revision notes. We're saying, well, hold on, maybe the other syllabus areas were okay. Maybe it's just a couple of them, like this syllabus area B, remember, where we scored just 40%, and I can focus on this area. So I can go back to my approved content. I can look at the relevant chapters. I can practice questions that maybe relate specifically to this syllabus area. And just to try and add a little bit more value as well, where we've got technical articles that directly address this syllabus area, so there's a couple that are referenced in this example at the bottom of the slide, we'll call them out for you as well. So yeah, I'm hoping that people are going to find this useful, rather than guessing on what my weak areas were, rather than having to go back and revisit the whole syllabus. This will pinpoint particular areas for me to focus, and will hopefully make me more efficient as as I prepare for my next step. Objective test skills, yeah, again, hopefully this is useful. There's not a huge amount of depth here to cover, but take whatever you can from this, of course. So objective test skills we group into 4 areas. So application, where you are applying some knowledge. We've got more knowledge-based questions that are straight up testing that based knowledge. Then we've got more wordy type objective test questions, the narrative ones. And then calculation is fairly self-explanatory. So just looking at this as an example, obviously the weaker areas are application and calculation. So if I was looking for my next steps at applied skills level, maybe I'm going to focus more on the application style questions where I have to apply some knowledge, and I'm going to focus on maybe the more numerical type questions as part of my preparation. So like I say, not a huge amount of depth here, but hopefully a nice indicator to help me with my practice questions for my next attempt. Okay, constructive response feedback, I think is quite intriguing, I must admit. And again, speaking to students as we design this feedback, thinking back to our own experiences as students, a lot of us at your ACCA team are ex-tutors as well. So thinking about students that we used to work with, students would come out of an exam. When you leave that exam room, if you sat remotely, when you switch off your machine to reflect on what's just happened, you obviously have a fairly clear idea of what the key areas were that you've been asked about. But obviously as time goes by, particularly by the time results come out, it's harder to retain what the question was actually asking, and then how you think you performed in that particular question. So one of the things I really like about this feedback for constructive response is that you will get a bit of a hint about what the question actually covered. So for each of the constructive response question, it will give you a summary of the overall area that question was addressing. So in this particular example, we're talking about it being in the top line, a decision-making question. And hopefully as soon as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, yeah, I can remember. I remember that question, and I remember I think I did okay. Oh yeah, look, I got 56% on it. Okay, so I'm okay in terms of decision-making type questions potentially. And then, as I say, what we do is look at how well the students performed, and then give some information from the examiners that relates to what students have done that fall into the results band that this particular student has achieved. So 56% would say is just about a marginal pass. So going forward, just make sure that you do keep your knowledge up to date, and don't forget the importance of calculations and then making recommendations using those decision-making techniques for these types of questions. So like I say, if we passed overall, that's great. But if we had missed out overall, and if we hadn't performed particularly well on this particular style of question, we're getting some insight into the question that we struggled with, what the question was covering, and some hopefully really good advice from the examining teams on next steps on actually performing better on these types of questions covering these syllabus areas. And just to start to wrap up, and hopefully we're getting lots of questions through and comments through on this, and do, even after the session, if you're having the opportunity to look back at your feedback that you might have got from the September session, do contact your tutor, do contact your ACCA local team as well to give us feedback on what you think of it. We've just launched this, but we're keen to hear what you think of it. We're keen to enhance the offering in the future as well. And just calling out that within the feedback itself, you can get some tips and advice covering the sort of areas that we've discussed today, but it's always nice to have that captured for reflection in the future, and some video guidance as well, all about getting as much as you can from the information that we are able to share with you. Okay, Isabel, I hope I haven't run too much over time. You can tell that I'm very passionate about my exam performance, and hopefully the opportunity that it can provide to support students continue their journey. but I should probably reluctantly hand back to you to continue.
No, not at all. Thank you, James. That was a really, really helpful overview. And I think it was really valuable to spend some time going through that, because hopefully students can see how much it's going to help them in that reflection stage. So we are now going to look at building resilience, and it's really important to remember that lots of our students may suffer an exam setback at least once in their journey to qualification. Try to see this experience as an opportunity to build resilience, and I'm going to just spend a little bit of time now exploring what that means. So what do we mean by resilience, and how can you become a resilient student? Well, resilient students are those who encounter and find ways to overcome challenges. Setbacks are very normal, but they are temporary, not permanent barriers to your success. Progress may be a little bit slower than you'd first thought, but that doesn't mean you're not going to reach your goals eventually. And part of being resilient is recognizing that plans change and being willing to adapt. Next point is, don't be your worst enemy and let those negative thoughts derail your efforts. And I'm definitely guilty of that. But try to practice positive thinking. Remind yourself of your accomplishments and the reasons for pursuing ACCA qualification, as it can be easy to lose track of why you're doing what you're doing. Revisit your goals regularly for a motivational boost, and maybe talk to people as well. This could be your tutor, fellow students, a manager at work. They're going to help you maintain perspective and keep you on track. Also on this, being prepared for periods of stress is vital for developing resilience. How we view stress, it strongly impacts our ability to succeed. So focus your energy on the things you can control and the techniques you'll use to deal with stress in the future. Now, looking after your well-being is always important, but when it comes to studies, it can be a very stressful time. And if you do prioritize your health and well-being, then it's going to help you recover after a stressful or disappointing experience. So let's have a very quick look at some of the ways you can do this. Now, lots of advice is universal, so develop and maintain a good sleep routine, eat well, stay hydrated, make sure your body is receiving all of the nourishment and care it needs, and this is going to be very beneficial to your well-being. Make sure you schedule and actually take breaks. These are always the first things to slip from busy schedules, but getting outside, getting some fresh air, this is all going to actually be really beneficial to your studies when you resume them. Don't neglect to build in time to spend with your family and friends. Focus on some things you enjoy as well as studies. Be realistic. Don't set yourself up for failure by taking on too much at once. Reflect on your commitments, such as things in your personal life, trips away, work, and so on, before you set your goals. It's easier to keep up than catch up, and this means being realistic about the time you have to prepare for exams effectively. Share your study schedule with family and friends so they know when to give you space for focused study sessions. That's going to reduce the impact of constant distractions and interruptions, helping you feel more positive and productive. Also, be mindful of your study environment. Think about where it is you study. Is it bright, clean, tidy? We were talking on a Instagram session the other day about the saying, tidy desk, tidy mind. And it's so true. If your desk isn't tidy, spend some time decluttering and creating an ideal workspace. Connect with fellow students, support each other, reach out to everyone else studying your exam on the learning community, share your experiences with people who are going through the same thing as you, and that's going to help you feel less isolated. Lastly, there's lots of really good stress management techniques that you can explore. Find the one that works for you. It could be exercise or other physical relaxation techniques such as deep breathing and meditation. We've also got the ACCA Wellbeing Hub, which is on our website. There's a link to that in the resources tab. So moving on now, it is more than a week since results were released, and hopefully you've had time to pause and digest those results. But now you're going to have to start trying to refocus and begin making decisions. We're going to break these decisions down into 3 stages now. So first, review your plans for December. So based on your exam result, do your plans need to change? So for example, if you're a marginal fail, sometimes it's better to resit quickly, but that does mean that you're going to be taking on 2 exams. So do consider whether you're able to devote sufficient time to prepare for multiple exams. Sometimes it can be better to postpone the exam you haven't already attempted than to try and resit the previous one and that new one at the same time, if you see what I mean. So this all depends on you and your circumstances. Think about how close you got to the pass mark. Think about how your studies for the newer exam are going as well. You need to think about what you're going to be doing differently. So draw on those reflections that we spoke about earlier and really focus on what you're going to change when you resit the exam. We do always strongly recommend studying with an approved learning partner. If you haven't already booked, some offer shorter revision programs, so do have a look for those. Next, with 6 weeks to go, make sure you've planned out your study and revision time from now until the exam day and do follow it. So first point to make on this is review the syllabus and check for any changes. Then ensure you've allocated time for each topic in your plan. And remember that exam success is built on question practice in the real exam environment supported by effective debriefing. And we'll look into that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But all I'll say about this now is make sure to schedule time for that in your plan. So the final stage of decision making is the to get your exam book. So exam entry deadline is approaching. So think of it this way. When you're in an exam environment, you're operating under pressure, and this actually gives your performance a boost. So recreate that pressure in your studies by getting your exam booked and giving yourself a really clear deadline to work towards. Also, once you've booked, you're going to start receiving structured support via our in-session emails, and they're really fantastic. They'll count you down towards exam day and let you know what activities and resources you need to be covering each week. So hopefully that's been a useful overview of the kind of things that you need to be thinking about at this stage and gives you some structure to your planning. I did touch upon question practice just now, and there really is no better way to prepare yourself for an exam than to practice under exam-like conditions. It's a really vital part of any study plan, so make sure to use the ACCA practice platform to attempt questions and familiarise yourself with the exam environment. Now, ideally, you should try to complete at least 2 practice exams under exam conditions as part of your revision activities. And when you do this, it's really important to try and replicate the real exam environment as much as possible. So shut yourself away somewhere quiet. Tell family and friends not to disturb you. Resist the urge to look at your books, and for this activity to be as effective as possible, you do really need to be disciplined and practice the time. All of this is going to help you understand what areas you need to focus on, be it technical knowledge or areas of exam technique. When you're doing this, try to pay attention to what you're getting wrong, and crucially, try to understand why. Spend time revisiting those trickier topics to ensure that you're addressing any gaps in your knowledge before the real exam, and keep on practicing until you master them. Next, it'll be time to self-mark and debrief your answers. So, what do we mean by this? Well, it's really important to take your question practice to the next level with effective debriefing. And you can use the detailed marking guide contained in the practice platform to help you with this. But here's a few very quick tips to help you. Firstly, good presentation, it's key. Consider if you can make improvements to the layouts of your answers. A clear and concise presentation will not only help the marker understand the content of your answer, but it will help you in the moment as well. So it's a win-win situation. Think about that presentation and how you can make it as clear as possible. Check your answer length and assess whether it reflects the mark allocation. You should also make sure that you've answered all of the requirements. So really make sure that you're reading the questions properly so you don't miss anything. We know it's common for students to struggle within the allotted time. And if this is happening during your practice exams, you're going to need to think about your time management, for example. Make sure to check out examiner reports for further tips as well. And the last point, we'll keep on coming back to this. Think about what you can improve next time. So, the final days before the exam. The exam day is nearly here. What can you expect? And how can you take this nerve-wracking time and get the most out of it? Well, first of all, I'd say visualize success. And we've already discussed the importance of that positive mindset, but feeling confident is going to come from the preparation that you've done and the things that we've just covered. Next, I'd say plan your exam strategy ahead of the day itself. So if you're going to an exam centre, make sure you know the route, how long it will take you to get there. For students sitting the exams via remote invigilation, make sure to check your equipment, your internet connectivity, and exam environment meets the rules and requirements in the days leading up to your exam. And this is important, even if you've already done it once, as your computer settings or connectivity may have changed since then or been updated since you booked your exam. So as we've just covered, hopefully you'll have been practicing under exam conditions prior to exam day. So when it comes to the real thing, you need to, you'll hopefully feel better prepared and in control. You don't want to be cramming and rushing at this stage. This is going to have a negative impact on your performance. So you try and remember what you've practiced and apply it to the real thing. Exam success is a combination of your technical knowledge and your ability to apply it to the scenarios and questions in the exam within the available time. This is a common issue, time management, running out of time, as we've said, and it's one of the main reasons that students fail. So I'll repeat myself, practice, 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 and hopefully that will help you understand what you can achieve within the allotted time. My final point is that you'll undoubtedly feel nervous, and that's normal. That's that feeling of pressure is something that we all experience, and actually it can be beneficial to your performance, as I've already said. Don't compare yourself to others. I think everyone does this at some point. They'll look around thinking that I'm the only one who's suffering from nerves here, but that's obviously not the case. All you can do at this point is focus on yourself and remember what's within your control. So we'll have a quick look now at the ACCA resources that have been developed to support each stage of your exam preparation. And by that I mean the learning, the revision and the exam stages, but some of them are also beneficial throughout. So let's have a look at those. So before I go through them, actually just a quick reminder that there will be lots of useful links in your resources tab via the resources icon, So do explore them in your own time. I'm just going to summarize some of them now. So we've already talked about the ACCA practice platform. This is going to help you practice questions in the real exam environment. It's really essential for exam success. Our ACCA global website is packed full of study support resources, including syllabus documents, videos, articles, examiner reports, and lots more. Do make sure to bookmark the relevant exam page for you. If you want to, if you need help planning your calendar, then Compass is the tool for you. This is integrated within your My ACCA account. It's going to enable you to organize your time and set daily tasks and milestones. And the Get Ready modules are a really, really fantastic resource. These are self-check quizzes which assess your underlying knowledge and help you identify areas that you'll need to revisit ahead of the next exam. We've got a Student Study Resources YouTube channel that includes a whole host of curated videos arranged into playlists by exam, as well as an archive of webinars available to view on demand. We have a series of podcasts as well, and actually what I've done is included a link in the Webinar Resources tab to a new episode in which we speak to a newly qualified member who actually suffered setbacks in his own ACCA journey. So listen to that, and hopefully that will be inspiring. That will help you regain your motivation. From this webinar, it's that you're not alone. As I've said, head to the learning community to connect, maybe find a study partner. Finally, I know that students often worry about their English language skills and they wonder if it impacts on their results. So let me say first, rest assured that students are not penalised for spelling or grammar mistakes. As long as the marker can understand the point you're making, it's okay. However, if you do want to understand your current level of ability, then check out a new English language score test that we're offering in partnership with the British Council. This helps you understand where you are, and you can also get a certificate at the end as well. I've included a link to that as well in the resources tab that will take you to our webpage, which explains how this works and how you can access it. Right, so before we move into the Q&A section, I wanted to pause and maybe hear from you guys again. And what I'm asking you to do is go to the attendee chat function, comment, and maybe just give us an idea of what you might change in your next attempt. So do just comment in the attendee chat, guys. Let us know what you're thinking. Oh, everything. I'll give you. I'll put some ideas up on the screen, but do share what you think you'll change on your next attempt. To be changing the structure of your revision plan, attending a revision course, perhaps using the ACCA practice platform. We've got some people coming in now. More varied question practice, more question practice. Yep, that's really, really, really key. Only sit one exam at a time rather than try two, someone has said. Practice questions over and over and over, that's great. Yep, someone's going to check my exam performance. Better study plan, definitely use the performance review questions. These are all really, really good ideas, and I'm glad that a lot of you have already started thinking about this. And will be ready to implement the changes for your next exam. And we'll move into Q&A in a second, but just a final thought on this. Please do persevere. Like I said earlier, this is a challenge and it's going to perhaps knock your confidence at times, but you will reach your goals if you persevere and put the work in, reflect properly, support each other. It really is achievable for you all. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. As I said, I'm going to move to Q&A now, and I'm going to invite James back on.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for coming back, James. So I think we've had quite a few good questions come through. I might just kick things off with a question for you, actually.
Yeah, let's do it.
On a practical note, we've had a couple of people who are asking about my exam performance. Is there a time limit to be able to access that, or can they look at it in their own time and return to it?
It's a really good question, Isabel. I should have mentioned this when we were discussing it earlier. No, so that feedback will stay on there throughout the whole time you're a student. And let's say that you missed out on, I keep picking on PM. Let's say you missed out on PM in September and then you resat in December. You'll see both sets of feedback for as long as you want to. So if you're thinking about, I don't know, moving on to APM, let's say in September 23, you can see your attempts when you missed out, and you can see the attempt when you pass. So that will sit on your account for as long as you're a student.
Great. Yeah, it was very good listening to you go through it earlier. I do think this is going to be a really useful tool for people. So get out, guys. You can feel free to ask me a question if you've seen a good one, James.
Yeah, there's a good one, and I think we've kind of touched on this. There's a good one coming through that's asking about new or fresh mocks or content in the ACCA platform. I know we've got some plans coming up as well. I don't know if you wanted to mention that again.
Do you hear me okay?
You dropped out for me just a little bit, but you're back now.
Sorry. Sorry, can you repeat that, James? I'm very sorry. I've had a connection issue.
No, not at all. So I had a couple of questions about the practice platform and whether there's any intention for us to put some fresh content up.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's coming up ahead of we'll have some new mocks ahead of the December exam and debriefs coming up for those as well. It's definitely an activity worth engaging in, as we've already talked about. So yeah, definitely look out for those. And actually sorry about that little gap in my computer's being annoying. So I think actually, James, are they going to be on the practice platform around mid-November?
Yes, I think the 14th of November. So well worth a look. And that, I'm just seeing other questions come in, Isabel, about what should I do in the remaining month or so before December. If I was going to pull out one thing in particular, it would be engage with the mock event, not just the mock exam itself, but the wraparound stuff that we're going to stand up as well, whether that's signposting, exam technique, support, whether that is the debrief content that will be available as well. Really do try and squeeze as much as you can out of this. It's exam standard content, it's fresh content, you won't have seen it before. I'm not saying that you have to sit down and do it for the full, sit down and do it all in one go for a number of hours. Maybe you do it section by section, but however you do it, obviously ideally timed under exam conditions, but however you do it, just take as much benefit as you can from that resource that we're laying on. We've seen fantastic improvements in performance from students that have engaged with it previously. So yeah, if I was going to call out one thing and in response to some of the comments and questions that are coming through, just really jump on this mock event. It's like I say, exam standard, fresh content. It's in the exact software that you're going to see it in the real thing. And as I say, we've had fantastic results from students that have used similar content for previous sessions.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see what else we have coming through. It's really nice to see in the attendee chat as well, people saying that they've used some of our resources such as Compass and found it really helpful. So that's great to hear. There's some questions, James. I wonder if you could help with this actually. So we've had a few people, understandably, who are asking. They've had marginal fail, 2 marks off passing. What would be your advice for people who are at that point?
Yeah, I mean, again, if I think back to my own days, this rings true for me, and in a weird way, it's almost more frustrating getting the 47, 48, 49% compared to a sort of a worse fail in many ways. So if I had sat in September 22. Or if this happened to me in the future for applied skills, I would be going through my exam feedback with a fine-tooth comb to really pinpoint areas of concern. More generally, and this isn't an original answer, Isabel, but I stand by it. More generally, I would go back to my question practice, and I would try and be disciplined and cover off question practice across the different sections. So what we often see when we look at analysis for marginal fail students is that they tend to do okay on section A and even on section B, but marginal fails often fall down on section C, on the constructed response questions. And I always think that's a real shame, because a good performance on section A, in very general terms, gives a decent indication of okay technical knowledge. But then it's the application that is perhaps where students are just slightly struggling on, particularly for that section C. So we've talked time and again on the session about question practice for a reason. If I was thinking about marginal fail students, it would be the question practice again, but give equal attention to section A, section B, and section C. And there's so much content on the practice platform to help you do that. I'm not suggesting you sit down for 3 hours, every day and just hammer it out, but pick and choose. So let's say that for the next 3 days, when you've got an hour, maybe a day, do a section C question. So do it to time, then go and make a cup of tea, grab a biscuit or whatever, then come back and use the self-marking functionality on the practice platform. We've got past exams, we've got a specimen exam, we've got practice tests on there. There's so much content on there. So like I say, not particularly original, but question practice, and do force yourself to focus on that section C as well. It's tempting, isn't it, just to log on and bash out a few quick objective test questions, but the marks in section C are just as important as those ones in section A and B.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it was so encouraging just now seeing students in the attendee chat saying that what they're going to do next is practice and be disciplined in that question practice as well. So that's really nice to see. All right, what else do we have coming through? We've got time for a couple more, I think.
There's a couple more that I've just seen, Isabel, relating to my exam performance. If I just cover a couple off quickly.
Yeah, please do. Yep.
So someone asked, as part of the feedback, can they get a copy of the question that they were asked in the exam? Unfortunately not. I know it's an area that students often ask about and would like to see, but we're not able, unfortunately, to release all of the exam content. We release some every couple of sessions, of course. What I'm hoping, though, is that, particularly for section C, where we give an indication of what that question covers, that might be a useful prompt for students to remember what they were asked, and depending on how well they performed on that particular question, that will give them a steer on what types of questions to focus on. And someone else has asked about a printable version of the exam feedback, my exam performance. Not yet. It's something that we've got as a potential future development. If I'm completely candid, we wanted to start giving feedback as soon as possible, rather than waiting for every every additional feature that we want to add to come in immediately. So I don't have a time frame yet. It is on the potential future development plan. What I would say, though, and we've tested this out, it's not too onerous. If you wanted to take your feedback offline, if you did want to send it to your tutor, for example, then screen grabbing is an option. So not a particularly sophisticated solution, but in the interim, before we launch a downloadable or printable bit of functionality, screen grabbing might be worth considering.
Brilliant. Right, I'm afraid, I think at that stage, we'll have to wrap up because we've run out of time, but I hope everyone's found this session useful, and a big thank you again to James for joining and running through my exam performance. Just a reminder at this stage that if you've registered for the webinar, then you will receive a link tomorrow, which will allow you to rewatch it in your own time. So final thank you to James, to the ACCA team who've been answering your questions in the background, and also big thank you goes to everyone who's joined and has watched today. So Thank you for joining. Good luck in your next attempt, and bye-bye.